Ethan woke in darkness with a crushing weight pressing down on his chest. For a split second his mind was empty, struggling to understand where he was, who he was, and why he couldn't move. His eyes adjusted slowly to the dim glow of the room. He wasn't in his old apartment downtown. He was in the new house he had moved into only 2 weeks ago, the one that always felt a little too quiet, a little too cold. But none of that mattered now, because someone was on top of him, pinning him down, their face inches away from his own. His heart hammered in his ribs. He tried to push upward, to throw the intruder off, but her hands pressed hard against his shoulders, strong, unyielding. He caught a glimpse of her features, his new housekeeper, the woman he had hired only 3 days earlier. She had seemed ordinary enough, polite, efficient, almost invisible as she cleaned. But now her eyes were wide and unblinking, her face drawn close to his, and her voice hissed through the darkness like a warning. "Don't move," she whispered, the words sharp and urgent. "The walls are listening." The room seemed to grow colder. Ethan froze, not sure if he was trapped in a nightmare or if this was real. Every sound seemed amplified. The ticking of the old clock in the hall, the faint hum of the refrigerator downstairs, even his own shallow breaths. He tried to speak, to demand an explanation, but her hand rose instantly, covering his mouth, silencing him. Her grip was not just strong, it was inhuman. His skin prickled with unease. She leaned closer until he could see the strange gleam in her eyes. Not the soft brown he remembered when she had first introduced herself, but a pale glow, like metal catching firelight. Her breath was steady, calm, while his chest heaved in panic. "I told you not to move," she murmured again. "If you make a sound, it will notice. And once it notices, you will not live long enough to regret it." Ethan's body stiffened. His mind reeled. What was she talking about? Who was she really? His housekeeper? An intruder? Or something worse? He tried to turn his head to glance around the room, but she shook her head sharply, holding him down even harder. Her weight was deceptively heavy for her small frame, as though something beyond human strength was pressing on him. Then he heard it. A faint noise, like a slow breath drawn through the walls themselves. At first he thought it was the wind outside, but there was no wind. The sound was coming from inside the walls, deep and hollow, as though the entire house were alive, inhaling. He went cold all over. The woman finally lifted her hand from his mouth, but her eyes locked on him, warning him not to scream. She leaned close enough that he could feel her breath against his ear. "This house is not what you think it is," she whispered. "You should never have come here. And I should never have been assigned to you." Her words were sharp, broken with something like regret. Ethan felt sweat bead across his forehead as the weight of her meaning sank into him. Assigned? What did that mean? The floor creaked then, a slow groan from somewhere near the doorway. Ethan's eyes darted toward it, his breath catching in his throat. But there was no one there, just the darkness stretching out into the hall. And yet he could feel it, a presence, something waiting, listening. The woman shifted, moving her weight off him but keeping one hand tight on his wrist. Her grip was ice-cold, unnaturally steady. She looked at him, and for the first time he saw not fear in her face but determination, as if she had been waiting for this moment, planning for it. "My name is not what I told you," she said softly. "And I am not your housekeeper. You hired me, yes, but that was arranged. I was placed here to protect you. But I did not expect it to wake so soon." Ethan's thoughts spiraled, confusion battling terror. Protect him from what? Wake so soon? His chest rose and fell rapidly, lungs struggling to pull air. He wanted to demand answers, but the words caught in his throat. He only managed to whisper a hoarse, "What are you?" Her gaze flicked toward the wall, as though answering too loudly might summon whatever lurked there. Her eyes glowed faintly again, alien in their intensity. Then she looked back at him, and in a voice lower than a breath, she said, "Not your enemy. But if you do not trust me, neither of us will survive the night." Before he could speak again, the sound came once more, louder this time, rolling through the house like a deep exhale. The air shifted, the shadows lengthened across the ceiling, and the walls themselves seemed to pulse, as though alive. Ethan clutched at the sheets, his fear mounting. She tightened her grip on him, her voice fierce now. Listen to me. Do exactly as I say. If you want to live until morning, you must not let it know you're awake. The house groaned again, louder, closer, and Ethan realized with a chill that he was no longer sure where the house ended and where something else began. He wanted to believe this was a nightmare, but the coldness of her hand on his wrist and the sound of the living walls convinced him otherwise. His new housekeeper was no ordinary woman, and his new home was no ordinary house. And as the darkness shifted and the breath of the house grew stronger, Ethan understood one terrible thing. Whatever truth she was about to tell him, it was going to change everything he thought he knew about the world. Ethan sat upright on the edge of the bed, his breath still shallow, his chest tight with fear. The woman who had called herself his housekeeper stood near the door now, her posture tense, her head tilted as if she was listening to something he could not hear. The faint glow in her strange eyes had faded, replaced with a grim calmness that unsettled him even more than her sudden strength had. For a long moment neither of them spoke, and the silence in the house pressed down like a weight. The walls seemed to hum with a life of their own, a slow vibration that made the hair on his arms stand up. Finally, she turned back to him. Her voice was quiet but sharp, each word landing like a warning. You need to understand this house is not a home. It is not safe. It was built long before you were born, before anyone on this street was even alive. And it is not empty. It watches. It listens. And when it decides to act, there is no escape. Ethan shook his head, struggling to accept what he was hearing. His logical mind wanted to reject it, to laugh it off as madness, but the memory of those strange breaths through the walls silenced any attempt at denial. You're saying, the house is alive, he whispered, his throat dry. Her eyes locked onto his, and there was no trace of hesitation in them. Alive, hungry, and very patient. You were not the first to live here. But you may be the last if you don't believe me. His stomach twisted, his mind flashing to the old realtor who had smiled too wide when signing the papers, assuring him the house had been vacant for years. He thought of the silence in the neighborhood, the way the street always seemed deserted, as if no one wanted to linger too close. Why me? He asked, the question slipping out before he could stop it. Why this house? Why now? The woman stepped closer, her gaze sharp, unblinking. Because you were chosen. You think you moved here by chance, that you picked this house because of its price or its charm. But you were guided here. Pulled here. It wanted you. Her words sent a cold shiver down his spine. That doesn't make sense, Ethan said, shaking his head again, though his voice cracked with doubt. I don't believe in that kind of thing. I don't believe in monsters in the walls. The corner of her mouth twitched, not in amusement but in pity. She moved closer, lowering her voice to a near whisper, as though speaking too loudly might rouse the very thing she warned him about. It does not matter what you believe. It only matters what is true. And the truth is that this house has been feeding for centuries. Families came here, disappeared, records erased, names forgotten. People vanish, and the world moves on as if they never existed. That is what it does. It takes, and it leaves nothing behind. Ethan's skin crawled as the words settled in. He wanted to deny it, but the thought of the empty houses on the street, the hollow stillness of the neighborhood, all came rushing back. The silence had never been natural. It had been a warning he had ignored. He swallowed hard, his throat tight. Then who are you? He asked. If you're not a housekeeper, if you're not who you said you were, then what are you really doing here? Her expression shifted, the hard determination flickering with something almost human, weariness, guilt, even regret. I was sent to protect you, she admitted. Assigned, as I said before. But not by the people you think. Not by this world. There are things you are not meant to know yet, truths hidden to keep your kind from fear. I am not of your kind, Ethan. I look like you, but I am not you. I was placed here because the house woke earlier than expected. And because of who you are. His chest tightened again, a dull panic building with each word she spoke. "Who I am," he repeated, his voice thin. "I'm nobody. I'm just a guy who wanted a fresh start, a quiet place away from the city. I'm no one important." Her eyes glowed faintly once more, and this time he could not look away. "That is what you believe," she said softly. "But the house knows better. It knows your blood. It knows your line. That is why it wanted you. That is why you are here." The floor beneath them creaked loudly, as if to punctuate her words. Ethan flinched, staring down at the wooden boards that seemed to ripple in the faint light. He swore he saw the grain of the wood shift like muscle beneath skin, but when he blinked it was still again. His breath came faster, his body trembling. "You expect me to believe I was chosen," he said, his voice rising despite his fear. "You expect me to believe this house wants me because of my blood? That's insane." Her hand shot out, gripping his arm with unnatural strength, pulling him close. Her eyes blazed with intensity, and for the first time he saw a spark of desperation behind her calm exterior. "It is not insane. It is survival. You must understand this, or you will not live to see another dawn. The truth you refuse to believe is the only thing that will keep you alive." Ethan stared at her, his mind a storm of fear and disbelief. He wanted to pull away, to run, to leave this cursed house behind, but the walls groaned again, a low rumble that vibrated through the floor and into his bones. It was as if the house itself had been listening, waiting for his doubt, feeding on it. The woman released his arm and stepped back, her voice steady once more. "I will show you proof. But once you see it, there is no turning back. You will never see your world the same way again." Ethan sat frozen, his heart pounding, his thoughts spiraling in every direction. He wanted answers, but he was terrified of what those answers might be. Yet the choice was slipping from his hands, stolen by the living house that groaned and whispered around him. Whatever truth she was about to reveal, he felt it would not only shatter his understanding of the house but of himself. And deep inside, he feared it was already too late. Ethan could not remember ever feeling so helpless in his life. The room seemed to close in around him, the shadows stretching unnaturally along the walls, crawling like liquid darkness. He stood slowly, his body stiff, his muscles shaking with every step, and kept his eyes fixed on the woman who had once introduced herself as nothing more than his quiet housekeeper. Now she was something else entirely, someone who spoke of truths he had never wanted to hear. His heart told him to run, to throw open the door and escape into the night. But another part of him, the part that remembered the breathing walls, whispered that there might be no way out at all. "We can't stay here," Ethan said, his voice low but urgent. "If the house is alive, if it's watching us, then the only choice is to get out. I don't care where, we just have to leave." The woman's eyes flicked toward the hallway, her face expressionless. "You think escape is simple. But this house is not built like yours. Its halls are not fixed. Its doors are not honest. It will not let you walk away. But," she paused, as if weighing the danger against something greater, "there is a chance. And if you want to survive, you must do exactly as I say." Ethan clenched his fists. His throat felt tight with dread, but he nodded anyway. The weight of her words left him with no other choice. He followed her to the door, each step echoing too loudly, as though the floorboards themselves wanted to betray their movements. She placed her hand against the wood, closing her eyes for a moment, then whispered something in a language Ethan had never heard before. The door gave a low groan, the knob twisting slowly on its own. The hall beyond looked darker than it should have. The familiar shapes of furniture warped and bent, stretched into shadows that did not belong. Ethan's pulse hammered as he stepped after her, his body tense and ready to bolt. Every sound was magnified. The creak of the floorboards, the distant hum inside the walls, the faint, almost human whisper that slithered through the silence. He told himself it was his imagination, but deep down he knew it wasn't. They moved quietly down the hall, the woman leading with sharp, calculated steps. She stopped suddenly and held out a hand, signaling him to stay still. Ethan froze, His breath caught in his throat. Ahead of them, the wall itself rippled, bulging outward as though something enormous was pushing from the other side. A deep groan rolled through the house, followed by a slow crack as the wall split slightly, revealing what looked like glistening muscle beneath wood and plaster. Ethan's stomach churned. The woman's voice was no louder than a breath. "Do not look at it. Keep your eyes forward. The more you look, the more it notices." Ethan forced himself to obey, though every instinct screamed at him to stare, to try to understand the impossible thing he had just seen. He followed her past the warped wall, his body tense, his jaw clenched tight enough to ache. The sound of slow breathing followed them, as though the house itself leaned close, waiting. At the end of the hallway, the woman opened another door. Beyond it was the staircase leading down. Ethan nearly sagged with relief at the sight of something so familiar, so normal. But when his foot hit the first step, the wood beneath it shuddered. The staircase seemed to lengthen, stretching downward into darkness, the bottom vanishing as if swallowed by a void. "No," he muttered, shaking his head. "No, this isn't real. Stairs don't do that." "It is not a house," she reminded him sharply, grabbing his arm. "It is alive, and it does not want you leaving. We must go quickly, before it closes." She pulled him forward, forcing his legs to move even though his mind screamed in protest. Each step felt heavier than the last, the air growing thicker, colder, as though they were walking deeper into the lungs of some massive beast. Ethan tried not to look at the walls, but his eyes betrayed him, catching glimpses of things that made his stomach twist, patterns that pulsed like veins, shadows that bent in shapes resembling limbs, faint glimmers of eyes watching from cracks in the wood. At last, they reached the bottom, though Ethan could not say how long it had taken. Time felt wrong inside the house. He could have been walking for seconds or hours. The air was damp and heavy, carrying the faint stench of rot. He staggered slightly, clutching the railing for balance, and found it warm beneath his hand, pulsing faintly like flesh. He yanked his hand back with a gasp. The woman pulled him into the kitchen, where the faint moonlight spilling through the window offered the only comfort. Ethan rushed toward it, fumbling with the latch, desperate to throw it open and escape into the night air. But when he looked out, his blood ran cold. The street was gone. The familiar houses, the sidewalk, the quiet road, none of it was there. Beyond the window stretched an endless darkness, thick and suffocating, broken only by faint glimmers of movement. He pressed his hands against the glass, his chest tight, as he realized the terrible truth. The house was no longer in the world he knew. His voice cracked as he turned back to her. "What did it do? Where are we?" She looked at him with grim eyes. "Inside. It has pulled itself away, shifted out of your world. It does this when it feels threatened. Now we are trapped within it." Ethan's knees weakened, his hope draining away. He wanted to scream, to curse, to demand she fix it, but his voice failed him. The house creaked around them, the sound low and mocking, as though it enjoyed his despair. The woman stepped closer, her voice steady despite the fear tightening her jaw. "Do not give up. There is a way deeper inside, a hidden chamber it cannot fully control. If we reach it, we may find a way to strike back. But you must trust me, Ethan. You must believe me. Because whether you understand it or not, you are the reason this house woke. And you are the only reason it has not already devoured us both." Her words echoed through the suffocating air, leaving Ethan trembling with confusion and fear. He wanted to believe escape was still possible, but deep inside he wondered if the truth was far worse, that there was no escape, not for him, not for anyone who had ever set foot inside this place. The kitchen felt colder with every passing second, as if the air itself had turned heavy and poisoned. Ethan leaned against the counter, his chest heaving, his mind a storm of fear and disbelief. He had always thought of himself as practical, grounded in reason, but none of that mattered now. Nothing could explain what he had just seen outside the window, an empty void where his street had been, a darkness that shifted as if filled with unseen movement. The woman, no longer his housekeeper in any sense of the word, stood near the doorway, her posture rigid, her strange glowing eyes fixed on the walls as if she expected them to strike at any moment. Ethan's voice cracked when he finally spoke. "You said there's a chamber, something the house can't control. But how do we even find it? We can't trust the doors, the halls, they change every time we move." She glanced at him, and for a moment he thought he saw something almost human in her expression. Weariness, the weight of secrets too long carried. "There is a path," she said quietly. "It was hidden by those who built this place, a fault line in its design. If we can reach it, you may understand why it wanted you. And maybe then, we can survive." Before Ethan could answer, the sound came again, not from the walls this time, but from beyond them. A low hum, mechanical and sharp, unlike the house's breathing. The woman stiffened instantly, her eyes flashing with alarm. She moved to the window, peering into the darkness. Ethan followed hesitantly, and for the first time he saw movement outside, clearer than before. Points of light drifting in the void, glowing faintly like lanterns carried by invisible hands. "They're here," she whispered, her voice laced with dread. Ethan swallowed hard. "Who's here?" "The others," she said. "The hunters. My kind." The words struck him harder than he expected. He had barely begun to accept that she wasn't human, and now she was telling him there were more out there, others like her, but not on his side. His stomach knotted as he realized what that meant. If she had been placed to protect him, then the ones coming now had been sent for a different purpose. "They know the house has woken," she said, her voice low and urgent. "And they know it woke because of you. They will not let you leave alive. Not if they can help it." Ethan felt his breath catch. He turned back to the window, staring at the lights outside as they drew closer. Each one pulsed faintly, and with each pulse, he thought he saw shapes forming, tall, thin outlines moving through the dark, their features blurred but unmistakably humanoid. His pulse raced. "What do they want with me?" he asked, his voice almost a whisper. Her gaze met his, steady and unblinking. "To erase you. To erase what you are, before it spreads beyond control." Ethan shook his head, backing away, panic rising in his chest. "I told you already, I'm nobody. I don't have answers, I don't have secrets. I don't even know what you're talking about." The woman's expression hardened. "You don't need to know. Your blood knows. Your body carries it. That is enough." Before he could demand more, the house itself shook violently, a deep groan rolling through the walls like thunder. Dust rained from the ceiling, and a sharp crack split across the plaster above the doorway. Ethan stumbled, gripping the counter for balance, while the woman remained perfectly steady, her eyes blazing brighter now. "They're forcing their way in," she said. "The house resists them, but it cannot hold them out for long. We must move now." Ethan's legs felt heavy, his thoughts sluggish with terror, but her hand clamped around his arm, pulling him toward the back of the kitchen. She pressed her palm against the wall, whispering in that strange language again, and to Ethan's horror the wall itself split open, revealing a narrow passageway dripping with shadows. It smelled damp, metallic, and old, like a tomb left sealed for centuries. "I can't," Ethan began, but she cut him off with a sharp glare. "You can, or you die here. Choose." The pounding in his chest left him no choice. He stepped into the passage, the cold air closing around him like a fist. The woman followed, sealing the wall behind them just as another violent crash shook the house. Ethan pressed himself against the narrow stone wall, listening to the groans and cracks echoing from beyond. They moved quickly, their footsteps muffled by the strange material underfoot. Ethan tried not to think about the hunters outside, about their long shadows and glowing lights. But as they went deeper, he could hear faint voices echoing through the stone. Harsh, distorted, not in English, but filled with a venom that needed no translation. His stomach churned. They were calling to each other, tracking him, hunting him. The woman stopped suddenly, raising her hand to silence him. Her glowing eyes cut through the dark, fixed on a faint crack in the passage wall. Ethan followed her gaze, and his stomach dropped. Through the crack, he could see a sliver of the house's interior, and in it, one of the hunters had already forced its way inside. The figure was taller than a man, its body too thin, its skin like stretched porcelain. Its face had no eyes, only a faint glow pulsing beneath translucent skin. Long fingers brushed along the walls as if it could feel the pulse of the house itself. Ethan pressed back against the stone, trying to make himself invisible, every nerve screaming at him to run. The woman leaned close, whispering directly into his ear. "Do not move. Do not breathe. It can sense fear." Ethan clenched his jaw, holding his breath until his chest burned. The hunter paused, its faceless head turning slightly toward the crack in the wall. Ethan's heart stopped, certain it had found him. The creature tilted its head, listening, and for a moment the silence was unbearable. Then, slowly, it moved on, its tall frame vanishing into the shifting halls of the living house. Ethan let out a shaky breath, his legs trembling so badly he nearly fell. The woman gripped his arm again, her strength unyielding. "Now you see," she murmured. "It is not only the house we fight. The galaxy itself will move to erase you, once it knows what you are." Her words chilled him more than the sight of the hunter had. He wanted to deny it, to cling to the safety of ignorance, but the evidence surrounded him: living walls, impossible creatures, and a protector who wasn't human at all. He no longer knew who he was, or why any of this was happening. But as another crash shook the passage behind them, and the faint glow of more hunters seeped through the cracks, he realized the question was no longer why. The question was how long he could survive. Ethan staggered as the passage shook violently, dust falling from the ceiling and the walls trembling like the ribs of a living beast. The air grew thicker, warmer, as if the house itself was waking fully, no longer hiding its true nature. He could hear the hunters outside, their distorted voices echoing through the shifting halls, calling to each other in a language that scraped at his mind. Each sound made his skin crawl, but worse than the hunters was the realization that the house seemed to respond to them, pulsing and groaning like it welcomed their presence. The woman pressed her hand against the wall again, whispering the strange words she had spoken before. The stone rippled under her touch, opening another narrow path. She pushed Ethan forward urgently, her glowing eyes burning with determination. "It knows they are here," she said sharply. "It will turn against itself to destroy them, but it will destroy us too if we are in the way." Ethan stumbled through the opening, his breath ragged. The corridor beyond twisted like the inside of a giant throat, its walls lined with veins of faint light that pulsed in time with the deep groans around them. His stomach churned as he realized the truth. This place was not built. It was grown. He had walked into the body of something that should not exist. "What is this place?" he whispered, his voice hoarse. She glanced back at him briefly. "A prison. A weapon. Both. Long ago, your kind was meant to forget it. But you were born with the blood that can wake it. That is why they fear you. That is why they hunt you." Her words struck him harder than the shaking walls. His blood. He wanted to demand answers, to scream at her for explanations, but before he could speak the house convulsed violently. The floor rose beneath them, throwing Ethan against the wall. A deafening roar filled the corridor, not from a creature but from the house itself, its entire body shuddering with fury. Suddenly the wall beside them split open, and one of the hunters burst through. Its tall, skeletal frame bent unnaturally, its faceless head turning toward them. Ethan's blood froze as it let out a sound that was not a voice but a vibration, a piercing hum that rattled his bones. The woman moved with impossible speed, shoving Ethan behind her. Her arm shimmered, the skin splitting open to reveal a weapon growing from her flesh, a blade of pale metal that pulsed with faint light. With a swift motion she struck, slashing across the hunter's chest. The creature staggered back, no blood spilling, only a hiss of glowing vapor escaping the wound. Ethan could not look away. He pressed against the wall, trembling, while she fought like nothing he had ever seen. The hunter swung long, claw-like fingers, tearing chunks of flesh from the wall as it missed her. The house screamed in response, its walls convulsing, its veins glowing brighter as if it fed on their violence. "Run!" she shouted, her voice sharp and commanding. Find the chamber. Ethan forced his legs to move, bolting down the corridor. The passage twisted and bent beneath him, the floor slick and pulsing, the air thick with heat. Behind him, he could hear the clash of blade and claw, the roars of the house, and the hunter's terrible humming cry. He turned corner after corner, his lungs burning, his mind spinning with terror and disbelief. At last he stumbled into a wide chamber, unlike anything he had seen before. It was circular, the walls lined with massive shapes half machine, half organic, glowing faintly with patterns that seemed familiar in ways he could not explain. In the center stood a towering structure, a pedestal of dark stone, and on it rested a device that pulsed with a rhythm exactly like his own heartbeat. Ethan froze, drawn toward it against his will. His hand trembled as he reached out, his mind screaming at him to stop, but something deeper pulled him forward. His palm brushed the surface of the device, and the moment he touched it, the chamber exploded with light. Visions tore through his mind. He saw stars burning, fleets of ships shattering in silence, human figures standing against impossible creatures. He saw bloodlines traced through centuries, names he did not know but felt as if they were part of him. And he saw the house itself, built as a weapon of war, alive but enslaved, bound to awaken only when someone of his blood touched its heart. Ethan collapsed to his knees, gasping. His head spun, his vision blurred, but he understood now, he was not ordinary. He never had been. Something in his very blood connected him to this place, something ancient and dangerous. The woman staggered into the chamber then, blood, if it could be called that, seeping from a cut on her shoulder. Her eyes glowed fiercely as she looked at him, then at the device pulsing beneath his hand. "It responded to you," she said, her voice filled with awe and fear. "I knew it. You are the key. You can command it." Ethan shook his head wildly, fear choking him. "No. I don't want this. I'm not a soldier. I can't fight this." Her gaze hardened. "You don't have a choice. It has already chosen you." Before Ethan could reply, another crash shook the chamber. More hunters were forcing their way in, their tall frames spilling through the shifting walls, their faceless heads glowing with cold light. The house roared again, its floor rising, its walls bending inward like ribs closing around a heart. Ethan stumbled back, his eyes wide, as the entire chamber began to shift and transform. The house was no longer a prison. It was becoming something else, something vast and monstrous. Its walls folded, its ceiling split open to reveal a cavernous void, and the ground beneath them rose as though the chamber itself were standing. Ethan realized with horror that the house was tearing itself free, reshaping into a living war beast of flesh and stone. The woman gripped his arm fiercely, dragging him to his feet. "This is the war inside," she said urgently. "The house, the hunters, and you. It will not stop until one of you is destroyed. Choose quickly, Ethan, or be swallowed with the rest." Ethan's pulse pounded in his ears, his vision filled with light and shadow, as the hunters advanced and the house roared around him. For the first time, he felt the strange pulse in his blood beating in rhythm with the device beneath his hand, as if urging him to claim what was his. But he had no idea what would happen if he did. The chamber shook so violently that Ethan thought the whole world was breaking apart. The hunters pushed forward, their faceless heads glowing brighter with every step, their claws scraping across the walls. The house roared again, a sound that rattled the marrow in his bones, the ground heaving as the living structure twisted into a new form. Ethan staggered, clutching the pedestal as if it were the only solid thing left in existence. The woman, no, not just a woman anymore, but something older and far more powerful, stood before him, her blade arm dripping with shimmering liquid. Her chest rose and fell with heavy breaths, her glowing eyes locked on the hunters. She did not back down, even though her body trembled with exhaustion. "Ethan," she said, her voice sharp but carrying a thread of desperation. "You must take control now. The house will obey you. It was built for your kind." His throat felt like sandpaper. His mind screamed with denial. I'm not who you think I am. I'm just a man. I never asked for this." She whirled on him, eyes blazing, her face close enough that he could feel the heat radiating off her skin. "You are not just a man. You are the last of them, the line that was hidden, the blood that survived when all others fell. You carry the memory of those who first bound this weapon, the memory of those who stood against the dark. And now it answers to you alone." Her words tore through him like lightning. Ethan shook his head, his chest heaving, his eyes wide with panic. Yet beneath the fear, something deep inside stirred, something that felt older than his own name. He could feel the heartbeat of the house thudding in his veins, could feel the device under his hand pulsing like an extension of his body. The hunters screamed then, their voices a terrible vibration that cracked the walls. They lunged, moving faster than the eye could follow. The woman stepped into their path, her blade flashing. She cut through the first, her weapon carving glowing lines across its body, but there were too many. One claw raked across her side, tearing deep. She cried out, staggering, her knees buckling. "Leora!" Ethan shouted the name without realizing he knew it. It had been whispered to him in the visions, hidden in the flood of memories. Leora, guardian of the bloodline, protector of the key. She turned toward him with pain etched across her face, her glowing eyes softening. "Ethan," she whispered, her voice breaking. "It must be you. Not me. I was only ever meant to guide you. The weapon, the house, it was never mine to control." Another hunter slashed, and she spun, taking the blow meant for Ethan. Her body collapsed at his feet, her blade flickering, her blood glowing faintly on the floor. Ethan froze, his chest heaving, his vision blurring with rage and terror. Something inside him shattered. The hunters closed in, their heads glowing like cold stars, their claws raised. But Ethan no longer felt helpless. He no longer felt small. His fear burned away, leaving behind something raw and fierce. His hand pressed harder against the device, and this time he did not resist the pull. He let it in. The chamber exploded with light. A surge tore through Ethan's body, so powerful it felt like fire and ice in his veins. His vision split. He was no longer just himself but also the house, the prison, the weapon. He could see every corridor, every shifting wall, every screaming vein of energy that coursed through the living structure. The house recognized him. It bowed to him. He rose to his feet, his voice echoing not just from his throat but from the walls themselves. "Obey me." The hunters froze mid-step, their glowing heads turning toward him. The house responded instantly, the floor rising like a living wave, walls twisting inward, crushing two of the creatures into nothing. The others shrieked, striking at the living structure, but the house moved faster, its tendrils lashing out, piercing them, tearing them apart in silence. Ethan stood tall at the center, his eyes glowing faintly now with the same light as Leora's. His voice thundered through the chamber, though his lips barely moved. "This is not your world. This is mine." One by one the hunters fell, crushed and shredded by the weapon they had sought to destroy. The chamber grew still, the house shuddering in satisfaction. For the first time, Ethan felt not like prey but like something greater, something terrible. He turned slowly toward Leora. She lay on the floor, her chest rising weakly, her eyes fading. Ethan knelt beside her, his hand trembling as he brushed against her arm. "You saved me," he whispered, his voice breaking. She smiled faintly, blood glowing at the corner of her lips. "No," she breathed. "I only reminded you of who you were always meant to be." Her hand slipped from his, and her body went still. Ethan's heart clenched. The chamber seemed to bow in silence, the weapon itself mourning the one who had protected its key for so long. Ethan pressed his forehead against hers, a silent promise burning in his chest. He would not let her sacrifice be in vain. When he finally stood, the house moved with him. He could feel its power like an extension of his will. The walls folded back, revealing an opening to the night sky above. He looked out, and froze. The horizon was filled with ships. Dozens, maybe hundreds, of hunter vessels hovered in the distance, their dark silhouettes blotting out the stars. They had come for him, for the bloodline, for the weapon he now commanded. His hands clenched at his sides, his veins still glowing faintly. He should have felt fear. But instead, he felt a calm certainty settle over him. He was no longer the man who had woken in confusion, pinned by a strange housekeeper. He was the heir to something far greater, a weapon born from human blood and memory. The ships moved closer, their weapons glowing. Ethan stepped forward to the edge of the chamber, the living structure rising beneath him like the chest of a giant. His voice echoed across the night. "Come then," he whispered, his eyes burning. "If you want a war, humanity will give you one." The house roared in answer, rising higher, its form unfolding into something vast and monstrous. The hunters in the sky faltered, their ships trembling as the living weapon revealed its true shape. And Ethan, for the first time, understood the truth that shattered him to his core. Humanity had never been weak. It had only been waiting. Waiting for him.